The hallway is finally silent. No pacing, no screaming, just the heavy rhythmic hum of the refrigerator. The industrial-grade deadbolt I installed on my bedroom door is unlocked for the first time in 3 years. It's over. If you want to know how a simple computer turned into a felony conviction that tore my entire family apart, stay with me until the end. I'm a 24-year-old graphic designer. I'm the quiet one. The one who keeps her head down, pays her bills on time, and tries to be the invisible glue holding a crumbling house together. But honestly, looking back at it now, I wasn't holding it together. I was just delaying the inevitable collapse. And get this, the collapse didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like the soft click of handcuffs and the muffled sobbing of a mother who realized, far too late, that her love had become a weapon. Let's just say that growing up the dynamic was complicated. It wasn't always a war zone. Honestly, there was a time when my brother Kyle was my hero. You have to understand that. Before the pills, before the shady friends, before the hollow look in his eyes that made you want to look away, he was the guy who taught me how to build my first PC. He was the one who defended me from bullies on the playground. I have this specific memory, clear as day, of him sitting on the floor with me, surrounded by Legos, patiently showing me how the pieces fit together. I missed that version of him every single day. But that brother died a long time ago. The person living down the hall from me wasn't Kyle. It was a ghost that looked like him, sounded like him, but only knew how to take. Basically, for the last 2 years, my life had become a game of tactical defense within my own home. I was living in a constant state of high-alert anxiety. My hands would start shaking the moment I pulled into the driveway. My stomach would turn into this tight, acidic knot whenever I heard heavy footsteps outside my door. It's hard to explain to people who haven't lived with an addict, but the air in the house just feels heavy. It smells like stale smoke and desperation. You stop sleeping because you're listening for sounds. You stop leaving cash in your wallet. You stop trusting the people who are supposed to protect you. And here is where it gets crazy. The real villain of this story wasn't even Kyle. I mean, yes, he was the one stealing, but the mastermind behind the chaos was my mother. She had this incredible, almost supernatural ability to deny reality. She was the golden child protector. If Kyle stole $20 from her purse, she'd convince herself she lost it. If he came home with pupils the size of dinner plates, she'd say he was just tired. She built this fortress of excuses around him, and I was the one constantly trying to breach the walls with logic. I remember one night, about 6 months before the event, I came home to find my jewelry box emptied out. Nothing expensive, just sentimental stuff. A silver chain my grandmother gave me, a graduation ring. I knew exactly where it went. I went to my mom, shaking, literally holding the empty box in her face, and she didn't even look up from her magazine. She just kind of waved her hand dismissively and said that I probably misplaced them. She told me I was being dramatic. She actually looked me in the eye and said that Kyle had been clean for weeks. So how dare I accuse him? I'm sitting there thinking, are we living on the same planet? I could smell the pawn shop on him. I could see the track marks he tried to hide under long sleeves in the middle of July. But to her, he was just her baby boy who needed a little help. And because she refused to see it, I became the enemy. I became the mean sister who didn't support the family. Have you ever felt like you were the only sane person in an asylum, and because you weren't hallucinating, everyone else decided you were the crazy one? That was my life. And the physical toll it took on me was terrifying. I wasn't just stressed, I was deteriorating. My hair started thinning. I'd wake up with these massive clumps of it on my pillow. My skin was gray. I developed this twitch in my left eye that wouldn't go away. I was 24, but I felt 60. I was working freelance gigs, pulling all-nighters to save up enough money to move out. But every time I got close, something would happen. The car would break down. The rent would go up. Or, in the worst cases, cash would mysteriously vanish from my secret hiding spots. So, I escalated. I bought a solid core wood door to replace the flimsy hollow one on my bedroom. I installed a commercial-grade deadbolt. I treated my bedroom like a vault. Inside that room was my livelihood, my custom-built PC setup. We're talking a high-end rig, dual 4K monitors, a professional drawing tablet, the works. All in, it was worth about $4,000. It wasn't just a toy, it was how I made my living. It was my ticket out of that house. Mom hated the lock. Oh, she despised it. To be fair, she took it as a personal insult. She would bang on the door while I was working, shouting about how I was treating them like criminals. She would say that families don't lock doors on each other. She would cry, loudly, right outside the wood, or talking about how I didn't love them. And honestly, part of me felt guilty. That's the sick part of the manipulation. You start to wonder if maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are too harsh. But then I'd hear Kyle. I'd hear him pacing the hallway at 3 a.m. back and forth. Back and forth. The floorboards outside my room would creak, and then stop. Silence. I knew he was standing there, listening, trying the handle, just checking to see if maybe, just maybe, I'd forgotten to throw the bolt. That sound, the subtle jiggle of the doorknob in the middle of the night, is something that never leaves you. It's the sound of a predator testing the fence. I tried to tell myself it was temporary. I tried to focus on the work. I had this big project coming up. A branding package for a tech startup that was going to pay enough for a security deposit on an apartment downtown. I was so close. I could literally taste the freedom. I had a vision of a quiet Sunday morning where I could make coffee without worrying if the coffee maker had been pawned. Long story short, I let my guard down. Not with the lock, never with the lock, but with my schedule. I decided to go away for a weekend, just 2 days. A friend was getting married a few hours north, and I needed a break. I needed to sleep in a bed where I didn't have to keep a baseball bat underneath it. Mom was thrilled I was going. She acted so sweet, telling me I deserved a break. She promised she'd keep an eye on things. She practically pushed me out the door. Looking back, I think she just wanted me out of the way, so she didn't have to deal with the tension. Or maybe, deep down, she knew what was coming and just didn't want to witness it. I remember standing in the driveway before I left, looking up at my bedroom window. I had this sinking feeling in my gut. You know that instinct that tells you not to get on the plane? I had that. But I ignored it. I told myself the deadbolt was secure. I told myself Kyle wouldn't risk it because he knew I was saving for the apartment, and if I moved out, he'd have more space. I rationalized it. I shouldn't have. Because while I was sipping champagne and pretending to be a normal 20-something at a wedding, my brother was grabbing a crowbar. And my mother was probably in the kitchen, turning up the volume on the TV so she wouldn't have to hear the wood splintering upstairs. Have you ever trusted someone to protect your sanctuary, only to realize they were the one holding the door open for the wolf? When I drove back that Sunday evening, I knew something was wrong before I even stepped inside. The house was too dark. Usually, Mom had the porch light on, but it was pitch black, and the front door was unlocked. Not just unlocked, but slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break out of my chest. My hands went ice cold on the steering wheel. I walked up the steps, pushed the door open, and the silence hit me. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a crime scene. I ran up the stairs, skipping steps 2 at a time, my breath catching in my throat. I turned the corner to the hallway and stopped dead. My bedroom door wasn't just opened, it was destroyed. The frame was shattered. Splinters of wood were scattered all over the carpet like confetti. The heavy deadbolt was still locked, clinging to a piece of the door frame that had been ripped violently from the wall. He hadn't picked the lock. He had brute forced his way through the structure itself. I walked into the room, stepping over the debris. My eyes went to the desk in the corner. Empty. The monitors were gone. The tower was gone. The tablet, the keyboard, the mouse. Even the surge protector. Just a tangle of dusty cables left behind like the guts of an animal that had been scavenged. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the dust outlines where my life used to be. And in that moment, the sister who remembered the Legos died. The sister who felt guilty about the lock died. The only thing left standing in that room was someone cold, calculating, and ready to burn the whole house down to get justice. Because this wasn't just theft. This was an eviction notice. He had taken my livelihood. He had taken my exit strategy. And the worst part? I could hear the TV downstairs. Mom was home. She had been home the whole time, and she hadn't called me. I am waiting for your command to proceed to step 3, Act 2, the breaking point. Please type continue. I walked down the stairs, but my feet didn't feel like they were touching the ground. It was like I was floating, completely detached from my body. The sound of the TV got louder. Some reality dating show where people were screaming at each other over cocktails. It felt grotesque. The contrast between that mindless noise and the devastation upstairs made me want to vomit. I walked into the living room. Mom was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a half-empty glass of wine on the coffee table. She didn't look up when I walked in. She kept her eyes glued to the screen, but I saw her shoulders tense up. She knew I was there. She knew what I had seen. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, monotone, almost robotic. She took a slow sip of wine, still not looking at me. "Where is what, honey?" "Don't." I cut her off. "Do not do this. My door is in pieces on the floor. My computer is gone. Where is Kyle?" Finally, she paused at the TV. She turned to me, and the look on her face wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. It was the look of a parent dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum. He had an emergency," she said, her voice wavering just slightly. "He owed some bad people some money, okay? They were going to hurt him. I couldn't let them hurt him." I stared at her. "So you let him rob me? You let him steal my job?" "That computer was how I make money, Mom. That was $4,000 of equipment." "It's just things," she snapped, standing up now, finding her footing in the argument. "You can buy another one. You have savings." He was in danger. Family helps family. What was I supposed to do? Let them break his legs? "I don't care about his legs," I said. And I meant it. In that moment, the apathy was total. "I care that you watched him take a crowbar to my room and you did nothing." "He'll pay you back," she shouted, pointing a finger at me. "He promised. Once he gets this new job at the warehouse, he's going to pay you back every cent. You just have to be patient. Don't you dare call the police. Don't you dare ruin his life over a computer. He's your brother." "He's a thief," I corrected her, "and you're an accessory." I turned around and walked out before I did something I'd regret. I went back upstairs, but not to my room. I went to Kyle's room. It was a pigsty, mattress on the floor, clothes everywhere, smelling like unwashed laundry and stale smoke. He wasn't there. Of course he wasn't there. He was probably halfway to the next town, high on my hard-earned money. I sat on my bed, surrounded by the splinters of my door frame. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the panic was setting in. That computer had all my client files on it. It had my portfolio. It had the project due on Tuesday. Without it, I was dead in the water. I couldn't work. I couldn't get paid. I couldn't move out. I was trapped. And that's when the switch flipped. You know that feeling when you're crying so hard you can't breathe? And then suddenly, you just stop. It's like a circuit breaker trips in your brain. The emotions just cut out. The sadness evaporates. The anger cools down into something hard and sharp, like a blade. I looked at the empty space on my desk. I thought about the 3 years of terror. I thought about the lock on the door. I thought about the emergency that was just another fix. And then I remembered something. Kyle was on probation. 2 years ago, he got busted for possession with intent to distribute. He managed to plea it down, thanks to Mom hiring an expensive lawyer she couldn't afford. But the terms were strict. One more strike. One more felony. And he was gone. No plea deals. No second chances. Mandatory time. Burglary is a felony. Grand larceny is a felony. Mom said, "Don't ruin his life." But sitting there in the wreckage of my room, I realized something profound. I wasn't ruining his life. He had already ruined it. I was just the one who was going to sign the paperwork. Have you ever realized that keeping the peace is just a fancy way of saying letting the abuser win? I didn't go to sleep. I didn't clean up the mess. I pulled out my phone and I started digging. If he sold it fast. Addicts don't hold on to inventory. They need cash now. He wouldn't have gone to a pawn shop. They require ID and fingerprinting, and he knows that trail is too easy to trace. He would have done a private sale. Cash in hand, no questions asked. I downloaded every selling app I could think of. Craigslist, OfferUp, LetGo, Facebook Marketplace. I set the search radius to 50 miles. I typed in keywords: gaming PC, NVIDIA, monitor, high-end, custom. I spent hours scrolling. My eyes were burning. My battery was dying. It was 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Nothing. I started to panic again. Maybe he traded it directly to a dealer? If he did that, it was gone forever. There's no receipt for a drug swap. But then, I thought about Kyle. He's lazy. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's a desperate opportunist. He wouldn't drive 50 miles. He wouldn't meet someone in a dark alley if he could avoid it. He would want the easiest, quickest sale possible. I changed the search radius to 5 miles. I sorted by newest first. And there it was. Posted 4 hours ago on Facebook Marketplace. Gaming computer. Fast sale. $800. My heart stopped. The photo was blurry, taken in a dimly lit room I didn't recognize, probably a friend's basement. But I recognized the machine. It was my tower. I could see the custom white casing. I could see the RGB fans glowing that specific purple I had set them to. And just to be absolutely sure, I zoomed in on the side panel. There, right in the corner of the glass, was a small silver sticker. Property of my name design. I had put it there as a joke when I first built it. He hadn't even bothered to peel the sticker off. I looked at the seller's profile. Mike Smith. A fake name. No profile picture. Account created today. He was selling a $4,000 setup for $800. He was practically giving it away. In the listing said, "Works good. Need gone tonight. Cash only. No lowballers." I checked the status. Pending. My stomach dropped. Pending meant someone was buying it. Pending meant it might already be gone. I needed to know if he still had it. I needed to know where he was. But I couldn't message him from my account. He'd see my name and block me. So, I created a burner account. Dude Brogammer 99. I grabbed a generic profile picture of a car from Google Images. I messaged Mike Smith. Me. Yo, is this still available? I got $900 cash. Can meet right now. I held my breath. I stared at the 3 dancing dots indicating he was typing. Mike Smith. It's pending pickup but guy hasn't showed yet. If you can come now with $900, it's yours. He was greedy. Of course he was. An extra $100 was another hit. Me. Sweet. Where you at? Mike Smith. Meet me at the 7-Eleven on 5th and Main. 20 minutes. I knew that 7-Eleven. It was 4 blocks from our house. I didn't reply. I didn't need to meet him. I needed the police to meet him. But I paused. If I called the cops now, and they just found him with the computer, Mom would say I set him up. She'd say it was a misunderstanding. She'd lie to the police and say she gave him permission to sell it. She would fall on the sword to save him, claiming it was a family dispute, and the cops would walk away. Civil matter? They'd say. I needed this to be bulletproof. I needed it to be undeniable. I needed him to confess to the crime, on record, or I needed him to be caught in a way that Mom couldn't spin. I looked at the messages again. Mike Smith. You coming? I typed back. Me. My car won't start. My girl can drop me off, but she's got to get ready. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I'll bring $1,000 for the hold. Mike Smith. Ugh, fine. But if the other guy shows up, it's gone. Me. He won't. $1,000 cash, tomorrow. 10 a.m. Mike Smith. Whatever. Message me then. I had bought myself time, but more importantly, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to get my computer back. I was going to get justice. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a ghost. Dark circles, pale skin, hair a mess. But the eyes were different. They weren't scared anymore. I wasn't the victim in the locked room anymore. I was the hunter. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of my brother. I felt something almost like pity, because he had no idea that the weak sister he had bullied for a decade was about to end his world. I am waiting for your command to proceed to Step 4. Act 3, Part A, the discovery and the receipts. Please type continue. The sun came up, but the house didn't feel any brighter. It just felt exposed. You know that gross, gritty feeling you get when you haven't slept and you've been crying, but you're dehydrated? That was my entire existence. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I didn't stay in the house. I couldn't look at the empty desk anymore. I grabbed my laptop bag, which was agonizingly light without my actual laptop in it, and drove to the local library. I needed a neutral ground. I needed a war room. The first step wasn't the arrest, it was the valuation. I knew the law better than I wanted to. In our state, theft under a certain amount is a misdemeanor, a slap on the wrist. But over $1,000? That's grand larceny. That's a felony. And felonies carry prison time. I sat at a scratched-up wooden table in the back of the library, the smell of old paper and floor wax grounding me. I logged into my email and started pulling receipts. Every single component of that computer. The graphics card, $1,200. The processor, $450. The motherboard, the RAM, the monitors. I printed them out, one by one. The stack of paper grew thicker. I was building a paper trail that weighed more than my brother's word. Have you ever looked at a spreadsheet and realized that the numbers in the columns weren't just money, but years of your life that someone else decided to spend in an afternoon? The total came to $4,150.32. I stared at that number. That wasn't just a felony. That was a guaranteed sentence. But I still had a problem. The civil dispute trap. I knew that if I called the cops, Mom would claim it was a misunderstanding. She would say I gave him the computer to sell to help the family. It would be he said she said. And the police hate getting involved in domestic arguments. They would tell me to take him to small claims court, where I'd win a judgment I'd never collect because Kyle has zero assets. I needed proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding. I needed proof of malice. I went back to the house around noon. My car wasn't in the driveway. I parked 2 streets over and walked. I wanted the element of surprise. I let myself in quietly. The house was empty. Mom was at work. Kyle was presumably hiding out or meeting his dealer. I went to the living room. On the coffee table sat the family iPad. It's an ancient thing, cracked screen, sticky from God knows what. Mostly used by Mom for Candy Crush and by Kyle for… well, I was about to find out. I pressed the home button. No passcode. Security was never a priority in this house, obviously. I opened Facebook. It was logged into Mom's account. I scrolled through her messages, but it was just the usual gossip with aunts. Nothing. Then I checked the browser. Safari had 5 tabs open. One was a recipe for lasagna. One was a weather forecast. And one was a Facebook Marketplace listing. But it wasn't the Mike Smith listing I saw last night. It was a search history. I clicked on the history. And then I saw it. He hadn't just used his phone. He had used the iPad yesterday afternoon while I was driving back. He must have logged in to check the value of the parts before he ripped them out. I went to the saved passwords. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, wet thudding sound in my ears. I searched for Facebook. There were 2 accounts saved, Mom's and Kylerm88. I clicked it. It autofilled. I was in. I wasn't looking at Mike Smith. That must have been a burner he made on his phone. This was his real account. I went straight to Messenger. I needed to see who he was talking to. I needed to know if he had confessed to anyone. I scrolled past the endless messages to random girls leaving him on read. And then I saw a conversation thread with Mom. My breath hitched. My hands went cold, the tips of my fingers going numb as I hovered over the chat. The timestamp was from yesterday, 4:30 p.m., right around the time I would have been on the highway. I opened the document. The text read, Kyle. She's gonna be home in like 2 hours. I can't get the door open. Mom. Use the tools in the garage. Just be careful. Don't break the frame if you can help it. Kyle. Got it. I'm taking the whole rig. Rick said he'd give me $500 for the parts. Mom. Make sure you get cash. Do not let him transfer it, and hide it before she gets here. I'll tell her you're at work. Kyle. What if she calls the cops? Mom. She won't. I'll handle her. Just get the money to T-Bone by tonight or we're both screwed. I read it again. And then a 3rd time. I wasn't angry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the iPad across the room. I felt nothing. Just this hollow, ringing silence in my ears. The room suddenly felt freezing, like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt lightheaded. It wasn't just Kyle. Mom didn't just cover for him. She instructed him. Use the tools in the garage. I'll handle her. She sanctioned the hit. She gave the order to execute my livelihood. She valued his drug debt over my entire career. She was willing to let me come home to a violated room, to let me feel unsafe, to let me cry and panic, all so she wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of his actions. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect. I took out my phone. I didn't just take a screenshot. I took a video of me scrolling through the messages, showing the timestamps, showing the profile names, showing the context. I clicked on her profile to prove it was her. I clicked on his to prove it was him. I made sure every single pixel was documented. Then I emailed the video to myself. I uploaded it to Google Drive, and I texted it to my best friend with the caption, "If anything happens to my phone, you have this." I placed the iPad back on the table, exactly at the angle I found it. I stood up. My knees were weak, like jelly, but my mind was diamond hard. I had the value. I had the confession. I had the conspiracy. I wasn't just going to get Kyle arrested. I was going to nuke the entire family dynamic from orbit. I walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove to the police station. But I didn't go inside yet. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the brick building. I needed to time this perfectly. If I went in now, they might arrest him before the sale happened. I needed him to complete the act. I needed him to take the money. I needed the transaction to be final so there was no, "I was just borrowing it" defense. And I needed Mom to be there to watch it happen. I looked at the clock. It was 1 p.m. The buyer, me on the burner account, was scheduled to meet him tomorrow morning. But I couldn't wait that long. I couldn't spend another night in that house knowing what I knew. I picked up my phone and opened the burner account again. Me. "Yo, change of plans. I got the cash now. Can meet you at your place in an hour? I'll throw in an extra $50 for delivery." I watched the dots appear instantly. Mike Smith. "Yeah, come through. Address is my address. Don't knock. Just text when you're outside." He was selling my computer. From my house. While I was sitting in a police station parking lot. I put the phone down. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. She looked dangerous. It was time to introduce them to the consequences of their actions. I am waiting for your command to proceed to Step 5. Act 3. Part B. The tactical setup. Please type continue. I took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from my palms onto my jeans, and walked into the precinct. I didn't go to the front desk where they handle lost dogs and noise complaints. I asked to speak to the detective on duty regarding a felony probation violation. You should have seen the desk sergeant's face. I don't think he expected a girl in a cardigan to be throwing around legal terminology like that. Here is the thing about police. They are overworked and underpaid. If you come in crying and messy, they see paperwork. But if you come in with the paperwork already done, they see an easy win. I sat down in this cramped cubicle with a Detective Miller. He looked tired, nursing a lukewarm coffee. I didn't waste his time with a sob story. I just laid out the binder I had prepared at the library. Receipt A, the invoices proving the value was over $4,000. Receipt B, the screenshot of the Facebook listing. Receipt C, the printed transcript of the text messages between my mother and brother proving premeditation. He flipped through the pages, bored at first, but then he stopped at the text log. He looked at the value of the computer. Then he looked up Kyle's name in the system. The clicking of his keyboard was the only sound in the room for a solid minute. Then he leaned back and let out a low whistle. He told me that Kyle wasn't just on probation, he was on a suspended sentence. That meant he had prison time hanging over his head that was only paused because he promised to be a good citizen. A felony arrest now wouldn't just mean a new trial. It would trigger the old sentence immediately. I'm sitting there thinking, this is it. I am about to press a button that I can never unpress. I am about to send my brother away for years. For a second, just a split second, I hesitated. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike. I remembered his laugh. But then I remembered the text. Use the tools in the garage. I looked the detective in the eye and told him I wanted to press charges. We set up the sting. It was almost comically simple. Since I was the buyer on the burner account, I controlled the timeline. I told Detective Miller that Mike Smith was expecting a buyer at my house in 45 minutes. Miller said he couldn't send a SWAT team for a computer theft, obviously, but since there was a known probationer involved, he could send a patrol car to interrupt the transaction. I told him not to come yet. I told him to wait for my signal. I wanted Kyle to be holding the cash, my cash, marked bills I had withdrawn earlier, or to be in the physical act of handing over the equipment. I needed the crime to be active. Driving home was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I had to walk into that house and act like a victim who had given up. I had to sell the performance of a lifetime. When I walked through the front door, the smell of lasagna hit me. Mom was cooking. Of course she was. It was her guilt coping mechanism. If she fed me, she didn't have to apologize to me. She looked up from the stove, smiling this tight, fake smile. She asked how I was doing. She asked if I had calmed down. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse her. I just slumped my shoulders and looked at the floor. I mumbled that I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. I told her I was going to take a nap in the guest room because my room was too messy. Have you ever had to look someone in the face and smile, knowing that in less than an hour you were going to destroy their entire world? The relief on her face was instant. She thought she had won. She thought I was rolling over. She told me to get some rest and that she'd save me a plate. I walked past the living room. Kyle was there, pacing. He looked jittery. He had the computer tower sitting on the coffee table, draped in a towel like it was a dead body. He was waiting for Dude Bro Gamer 99. I made eye contact with him. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed that I was walking through his business meeting. "I'm going to nap," I said, my voice dead flat. "Keep it down." "Yeah, whatever," he muttered. I went into the guest room and closed the door. I didn't nap. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, watching the minutes tick down. 2:58 p.m., 2:59 p.m. At 3 p.m. exactly, I sent a message from the burner account to Kyle. Me. I'm outside. Silver sedan. Be there in 10 seconds. Then I texted Detective Miller. Me. Go. I stood up, took a deep breath, and prepared to walk out into the chaos. I listened. The silence in the house was thick, pressurized, like the air right before a tornado touches down. I could hear the front door click open. Kyle was unlocking it for the buyer. I heard his heavy footsteps on the porch, and then I heard him call out into the driveway, asking if the person in the car was the guy from the app. Then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not one car, two. I opened the guest room door and walked out to the top of the stairs because I needed to see this. I needed to witness the moment reality finally crashed into their delusion. Mom was already running from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, looking completely confused. She started asking who was outside, her voice pitching up with that frantic energy she always gets when things go off script. Through the open front door, I saw Kyle freeze. He was holding the tower, my tower, in his arms. He was looking at the silver sedan, expecting a gamer with cash. Instead, Detective Miller stepped out, and even from where I was standing, I could see the badge glinting on his belt. Basically, the mood shifted instantly. Miller didn't scream. He just calmly ordered Kyle to put the computer down. You could see the panic hit Kyle like a physical blow. For a split second, he looked like he was going to run. He glanced back at the house, then at the open side gate, weighing his options. But then the uniformed officer from the second car stepped out, hand resting on his holster. Not drawing, just ready. And Kyle's shoulders just collapsed. The arrogance evaporated. He set the tower down on the concrete porch with a heavy thud that made me wince. And that's when Mom lost it. She pushed past the screen door and literally threw herself between Kyle and the officers. She started screaming at them, demanding to know what they were doing. She was yelling that he hadn't done anything, acting like a lioness defending a cub, completely ignoring the fact that the cub was holding stolen property. This was the peak of the arrogance. Even with the police in her driveway, caught red-handed, her instinct was to attack the reality of the situation. Miller tried to speak, informing her they were responding to a report of grand larceny, but she wouldn't let him finish. She started shrieking that it wasn't stolen. She was yelling about how it was a family computer and claiming that Kyle had permission to sell it. She was practically begging Kyle to back her up, screaming at him to tell the officers it was all a big misunderstanding. Kyle wasn't talking, though. He was staring at the ground, pale as a sheet. He knew. He knew about the suspended sentence. He knew the math. Miller just looked up at the house. He looked right at me standing at the top of the stairs. Mom followed his gaze. She turned around and saw me. The look on her face shifted from confusion to betrayal, and then to pure, white-hot rage. It was terrifying. It was the face of a woman who realized her control was gone. She started hissing at me, asking if I did this. She wanted to know if I was the one who called them. I didn't say anything. I just walked down the stairs, slow and steady. My legs felt like lead, but I didn't stumble. I walked past her, past Kyle, and stood next to Detective Miller. Miller asked me if the property on the porch was mine, but before I could answer, Mom grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, painful, her nails digging into my skin. She leaned in close and started whispering this venomous threat into my ear. She basically told me that if I said a word, if I sent him away, I was dead to her. She ordered me to tell the police it was a mistake. She demanded that I lie and say I gave it to him. Have you ever stood on a precipice knowing that one sentence would sever the rope holding you to the only family you have, and realized you were the one holding the knife? I looked at Kyle. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, knees wet with tears. He looked like the little boy who used to play Legos. He started mouthing the word, please. It was the ultimate guilt trip, the final test, the last chance protocol. He started stuttering, whispering that he didn't mean to, that he just needed to borrow it and he was going to pay me back. He was begging me to stop this. I looked at him. I almost broke. I almost told Miller to forget it. But then I looked at the tower. I saw the sticker on the glass. And I heard Mom's voice in my head from the text message I read an hour ago, where she told him to sell it before I got home. They weren't sorry they stole it. They were sorry they got caught. I pulled my arm out of my mother's grip and looked her dead in the eye. I turned to the detective and stated clearly that he did not have permission. I told them he broke down my door. I stole $4,000 of equipment and that my mother helped him do it. The color drained from Mom's face. She looked like she had been slapped. I looked at Miller and told him to take him. The moment those words left my mouth, the atmosphere in the driveway shifted from a domestic dispute to a tactical operation. It was like the air pressure suddenly dropped. You know that feeling when you're underwater and your ears pop? That happened to everyone at the exact same second. Detective Miller didn't hesitate. He gave a sharp nod to the uniformed officer, and the transformation was immediate. They weren't asking questions anymore. The officer stepped forward, his hand moving to his belt, and the metallic snick of handcuffs being pulled from a pouch cut through the afternoon silence like a gunshot. Kyle didn't fight. That was almost the saddest part. He didn't try to run. He didn't puff up his chest. He just deflated. It was like watching a marionette whose strings had been cut. His knees buckled slightly, and he turned around without being told, placing his hands behind his back. The arrogance that had filled the house for years, the swagger of the golden child who could do no wrong, just evaporated into the humid air. He looked small. He looked like a child playing dress-up in a criminal's life, suddenly realizing the game had real-world rules. But if Kyle was the deflation, Mom was the explosion. As soon as the officer grabbed Kyle's wrists, Mom let out this sound that I can only describe as feral. It wasn't a word. It was just pure, unfiltered panic. She lunged forward, trying to physically pry the officer's hands off her son. Miller stepped in between them, holding up a hand to block her, his voice dropping into that commanding, authoritative baritone that cops use to override chaos. He told her to step back, warning her that she was interfering with an arrest and that she needed to calm down immediately or she would be joining him. She didn't care. She turned on me. And here is where it gets crazy. You would think, logically, that she would be mad at the son who stole, or the police who were arresting him. But no, in her twisted narrative, I was the villain. I was the Judas. She started screaming at me, her face twisting into something ugly and red, veins popping in her neck. She wasn't making sense at first, just shouting accusations. She demanded to know how I could do this to my own flesh and blood. She yelled that I was jealous, that I had always been jealous of him, and that I was doing this out of spite just to hurt her. She was literally spitting as she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the handcuffs like they were my fault. I stood there, frozen. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they could see it through my shirt. But on the outside, I forced myself to be a statue. I was gripping my own elbows, digging my nails into my skin to ground myself, to keep from shaking. Have you ever watched a parent grieve for the living while you were standing right there, realizing that they would rather see you victimized than see their favorite face consequences? Mom switched tactics. The anger wasn't working, so she went for the guilt. She started bargaining, right there in the driveway with the neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. She turned to Miller and started rambling about how she would pay for the computer. She swore she would write a check right now for double the amount if they'd just let him go. She told them that Kyle was a good boy who just made a mistake, that he had a bright future, and that this would ruin his life. She sounded desperate, pathetic, her voice cracking as she tried to rewrite reality in real time. Miller wasn't having it. He calmly informed her that grand larceny isn't a transactional dispute that can be settled with a checkbook, especially not with a suspect who is already on a suspended sentence for a prior felony. He explained, with brutal efficiency, that the state was pressing charges, not just me. While this was happening, the uniformed officer was walking Kyle toward the squad car. Kyle was stumbling, his head hanging low, his feet dragging on the asphalt. He looked over his shoulder at me one last time. He wasn't crying anymore. He just looked hollow. It was the look of someone who had been running a race on a treadmill for years and finally fell off. I felt this wave of nausea hit me. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run back inside and hide under my covers. My brain started whispering that maybe I was too harsh. Maybe 3 years in prison was too much for a computer. I remembered the text message again. Use the tools in the garage. I remembered the splintered wood of my door. I forced myself to remember the fear I felt every night listening to his footsteps. That fear was the fuel I needed. I wasn't sending him to prison. I was saving myself. Mom realized the bargaining wasn't working. The officer was guiding Kyle's head down so he wouldn't hit the doorframe as he was shoved into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed down the street. She turned back to me, and the look in her eyes was pure hatred. The tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, making her look like a tragic clown. She walked up to me, getting right in my face, invading my personal space until I could smell the wine on her breath from earlier. She started whispering now, a low, venomous hiss. She told me that I was dead to her. She said that I was ungrateful, that I was a traitor, and that she hoped I was happy with my precious computer because it cost me my family. She asked me how I slept at night. She accused me of planning this, of setting him up, of waiting until she was vulnerable to strike. She said that family protects family, no matter what, and that by breaking that rule, I was no daughter of hers. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, raised me, and then systematically devalued me to protect a predator. I looked at the house behind her, the place that was supposed to be a sanctuary but had become a prison. I thought about all the things I could say. I could scream about the text messages I had found. I could tell her that I knew she was the one who told him to do it. I could tell her that she was an accomplice, but I knew it wouldn't matter. To a narcissist, the truth is just an inconvenience. So I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the image of the screenshot I had taken, the text message where she told him to sell it before I got home. I held the screen up to her face. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes scanned the text. Her mouth opened, then closed. The color drained from her face again, leaving her looking gray and old. She knew. She knew that I knew. And she knew that if she kept pushing, she might be the next one in the back of a police car. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Detective Miller walked up to me. He handed me a business card and told me that someone would be in touch about the statement and the court date. He told me that the computer would have to be taken into evidence, but I would get it back eventually. He looked at my mom, then back at me, and gave me a look that said, "You did the right thing, kid." He got into his car. The cruiser's lights were still flashing, painting the house in red and blue strobes. The engines revved. Mom didn't move. She just stared at the spot where the car had been, trembling. I turned to go back inside, not to stay, but to pack. I knew I couldn't sleep here tonight. I knew I couldn't sleep here ever again. She grabbed my arm one last time. Not hard, just desperate. She asked me, her voice trembling, why I couldn't just let it go. She asked why a machine was more important than my brother. I pulled my arm away. I looked her dead in the eye and delivered the only answer that mattered. "You told him to sell it before I got home," I said, my voice ice cold. "I just made sure the transaction went through." I walked past her, up the steps, and into the empty house. I didn't look back at the police cars driving away. I didn't look back at my mother crying in the driveway. I walked straight up to my room, stepped over the shattered doorframe, and started packing my bag. The house was quiet. The pacing was gone. The threat was gone. It was finally over. I didn't sleep in a bed that first night. I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot because I was too adrenaline sick to interact with a hotel receptionist. I remember staring at the fabric of the car roof, watching the patterns of headlights sweep across it, realizing that for the first time in my life, I was technically homeless. But strangely, the car felt safer than my bedroom ever had. The lock on the car door was real. The space was mine. The next few months were a blur of legal bureaucracy and digital silence. I moved into a friend's studio apartment, sleeping on a futon that smelled like cat litter, but I paid my rent on time and I didn't have to hide my wallet. The court case didn't drag on like they do in the movies. When you hand the district attorney a file containing purchase receipts, a confession via text message, and a police report of the suspect caught holding the stolen goods, the justice system moves with terrifying efficiency. Kyle's public defender tried to argue for rehab diversion, painting him as a victim of circumstance. But the judge looked at the suspended sentence from the previous felony. He looked at the intent to sell evidence. I went to the sentencing. I felt like I had to. I sat in the back row, wearing sunglasses, trying to make myself invisible. Mom was in the front row, of course. She was wearing black, like she was at a funeral, sobbing loudly into a handkerchief every time the judge spoke. She didn't look at me. I think she knew that if she made eye contact she might scream, and the bailiff would remove her. The judge reinstated the suspended sentence and added time for the new charge. 3 years in a state correctional facility, mandatory minimum. No parole eligibility for at least 18 months. When the gavel came down, it didn't sound like justice. It just sounded like a heavy wooden block hitting a desk. It sounded like the end of a very long, very bad chapter. Kyle didn't look back at Mom as they led him away. He just looked at the floor. I think, in a weird way, he was relieved. Prison meant a routine. It meant he didn't have to hustle for his next fix. It meant the noise in his head would finally have to stop. Have you ever won a war, only to realize that the battlefield is so scorched that you can't even celebrate the victory? The social fallout was where the real violence happened. You have to understand that in my family, loyalty is the currency. By calling the police, I had crashed the economy. My phone became a grenade. I started getting texts from aunts I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Cousins who didn't even know my birthday, were suddenly messaging me long paragraphs about forgiveness and blood. They called me cold. They said I had a heart of stone. They spun this narrative that I had sent a sick boy to prison over a toy. Mom was controlling the spin. She was telling everyone that I had set him up, that I was jealous of the attention he got, that I was a vindictive sister who hated her family. For a week, I let them batter me. I read the messages. I let the guilt wash over me. But then I remembered the iPad. I remembered the video I took of the text messages. So I did the only thing left to do. I went nuclear. I opened the extended family group chat, the one with 30 people in it, used for planning reunions and sharing baby photos. I didn't write a defense. I didn't argue. I just uploaded the video of Mom coaching Kyle on how to break into my room, the video where she told him to get cash and hide it before she gets home. I hit send. Then I left the group. Then I blocked every single number. I heard through a mutual friend that the silence in that chat was deafening. No one could defend it. No one could spin it. They saw the corruption at the root. Mom lost her audience. She lost her narrative. She was left alone in that big, empty house with the broken doorframe and the silence of a son who wasn't coming back. It took 6 months for the police to release my computer from evidence. When I went to pick it up, it was covered in fingerprint dust and the case was scratched, but it turned on. The fans spun up. The lights glowed that familiar purple. I didn't keep it. I couldn't look at it without seeing Kyle on the porch. I wiped the hard drives, saved my work to the cloud, and sold the rig to a college kid for a fair price. I used the money to put a deposit down on my own place. I live in a small apartment now. It's not much, just a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. The paint is peeling slightly, and the radiator clanks in the winter. But let me tell you about the door. It's a standard, hollow core door. The lock is a flimsy little privacy latch that you could pop with a paperclip. And I never use it. I leave my wallet on the kitchen counter. I leave my laptop charging on the coffee table. I sleep with both earbuds in, completely deaf to the world, because I know that no one is pacing the hallway. I know that no one is testing the handle. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Kyle. I wonder if he's getting clean. I wonder if he hates me. Sometimes I think about Mom, sitting in that dark living room, drinking her wine, waiting for a phone call that isn't coming. I miss the idea of them. I miss the family I wanted to have. But I don't miss the family I actually had. There's a price for peace. It cost me my brother. It cost me my mother. It cost me the comfort of denial. But tonight, as I sit here typing this on a new laptop, in a room that is quiet and safe and mine, I know I got the better deal. The lock on the door wasn't to keep them out. It was to keep the truth out. And once the door was broken, the truth got in. And the truth set me free.